Okay, in this video I'd like to talk about return values. So in the graphics library and in the draw functions, we saw how we could pass data into a function, right, with parameters and arguments. But functions can also return values. So I want to change this to list view, and I want to make a new sandbox here in CS20. Again, just a static one. And I'm going to call this random library. We have a graphics library. We're going to have a random library. And this is going to be a file with some functions dealing with random values. Okay, so first things first. Oh, what just happened? Okay, first things first. Let's create a new file here. I'm going to call it random library.js. And we should probably have a main.js as well, because the library is going to be a library of random functions, right? And in main.js we can use those functions as long as we include them. So I'm just going to delete this for a second, and we'll load our JavaScript. To do that comment, I just hit Control /, okay? And in here we need a script tag, source equals, and we want to do the library first, and then we want to do the main.js. And that's so that all of those functions have loaded and then they're ready to be used inside of main.js. Okay, cool. So before we get into this, I'm going to open this up in a new window. I'm going to hit my console. And I just wanted to show you quickly in the console that we've done functions. Our JavaScript has functions that return values. For example, prompt. Perfect. Prompt. What is your name? Right? I hit enter. I type in something, and this function returns whatever was typed in. Right? Math.random. That's a built-in random function that returns a random number between 0 and 1. Okay? These functions return values. And we can do stuff, right? We can go let rand num be assigned math.random. And rand num now stores whatever this function returned. Right? The function returned, it basically replaces the function call with the value it returns, and then I can assign it, or we can do like a calculation, right? Math.random plus, if I could type plus, math.random. Right? So two random numbers, and it added them together and return that result. Anyway, so functions can take in values like this. What is your name? It's a message that this function takes in, and it can return a value. So these are built-in functions that do that. I want to try to build my own functions that can do that. So the first one is that math.random function is great, but I wish I had a random function that I could pass in like 1 to 10, and it would give me a random number between 1 and 10. So I want to define a function called random des, and I want to pass in a low and a high value. Right? Pass in a low and a high value. And I'm not going to go into too much detail on the calculation here, but basically in order to get a random number between low and high, right, if this was 1 to 10, what I want to do is I want to take math.random, which is a number between 0 and 1. I want to multiply it by the difference between high and low. High minus low is like the spread, right? So this is math.random is 0 to 1. When I multiply this by the spread, it spreads it out from 0 to whatever, 0 to 9. And then because this starts at 0 and I want it to start at low, we need to add low. And I go return. That's as simple as it is to return something from a function. You just use the keyword return, and then you return whatever's in the expression after the keyword return. Now this also, if you didn't understand these calculations, what's cool is now that I've defined this function, who cares, right? It'll work, right? So let's try to call this. I'm going to go let temp be assigned random decimal 1 to 10. and then I'll just go console.log temp. Okay, I'll save that. I'll hit refresh here, and there is my random decimal between 1 and 10. So every time I hit refresh, it's a little slow. There we go. And I can change this, right? What if I wanted between 100 and 200? Right? Random decimal between low and high. 200 minus 100 is 100. Math.random times 100, and then plus low. So this function it does it, right? It'll just work. Perfect. 113, 140. Awesome. Okay, so we can pass the values in. 100 and 200 get stored in these parameters, and this function can return, and I can store that returned value and print it out. Okay, let's do another function, called random int. And it's going to be very similar. I'm actually going to just hit Control-C on this line, which copies the whole line, and hit Control-V. And all I need to add is a math.floor. And I'm going to wrap this whole thing in a math.floor, and it'll round it down. I should also have descriptions, return a random decimal between, what is this again? Toggle preview. There we go, good. Return a random decimal between low inclusive and high exclusive. Just like math.random goes between 0 inclusive and 1 exclusive, by doing this calculation, the low value is inclusive, the high value is exclusive. It goes up to the value, but doesn't actually equal it. And then this one, I'm going to copy and paste, but this is return a random integer, right? No decimals. And let's test that out. And instead of the console to test it out, let's give this h1 an ID of output. And then in my main.js, let's add an event listener. Whenever I click the document anywhere, I'll do just a generic run code function. And in here, I'm going to go document.get element by ID output. .innerHTML is assigned random int 5 to 9. Cool. Let's try that. So I'll hit save, refresh, and every time I click, awesome, there's my h1, and I get a random number between 5 and up to 9, but not including 9, right? 8's going to be my highest value. And if I change that to 50 to 90, hit save, I should hopefully, I broke it. Why did I break it? Okay, hold on, did I do something wrong here? I saved it, Control S, let's go back here, hit refresh. Okay, you know what, let's close it. And toggle the preview mode. Click, okay, there we go. So every time I click a number between 50 and whatever. Oh, you know what, maybe, sorry, I kept refreshing, I probably just had to click the document. Whoops. Okay, anyway, so that's working. So I've defined these functions, random def, random int, and this main.js can use those functions, random int. Cool. To get some more practice with these return values, let's try random RGB. Function random RGB. And this isn't going to take in anything, but I want to return an RGB string. You know how we go RG, oops, that's not what I wanted. RGB, and then like 255, 0, 120. Okay, that's a valid RGB string if I put it in quotations. And I could use that in my CSS, right? So if I did this now, return RGB 255, 0, 120, this function would return this specific string. And you know, let's try that for a second. I'm going to go here, and instead of Sure, let's do this. I'm going to do here, let h1 element be assigned this, just so I have a reference to it, because I'm going to use it more often. So now I can just select this and go h1 element dot inner HTML is assigned random int. Cool. h1 element dot style dot color is assigned random RGB. Right now, this RGB function isn't very random. It's always going to return this color, but let's see if that works. Refresh. Click, click, click. Cool. Okay, so like I said, it's not random because it's always the same. Oops, it's always the same color that this function returns. But I thought I'd show you that to see that this function will return a value. That string gets replaced with the function call, and the color becomes what this function returns. But now let's do the random part. So let's create some variables. Let r be assigned a random integer between 0 and 256. So these RGB values can be anything from 0 to 255. So 256 is exclusive, right? And then I'll just copy and paste that. RGB. And then in here, we're just going to replace these numbers with the variables. So plus R. And then this number, same thing. Quotation. Oops, quotation. RG. And then end that. Plus B. Right, so I'm going to build this string by taking this string plus R plus the comma plus G plus the comma plus B plus the end string. And these RGB values are going to be random values. Okay, let's see how that looks. Hit refresh, and every time I get a random color. Awesome. Anyway, so like we were saying, functions you can pass values into functions, parameters and arguments, and you can return values. We are returning the result of this calculation, and we can return a string that we've built. We could also do some things like, oh, you know what, I'm going to leave it at that. But there's other options for this, and maybe you should try this as a little activity. You could do function random font, right? Generate a random number, and if random is equal to 1, right? Use the random int function. If it equals 1, return Arial. If it returns 2, return Verdana. If it returns 3, return Comic Sans, whatever. Or you could do like a random rainbow color, right? Generate, how many colors in the rainbow? 7. Generate a random integer between 1 and 7, or 1, 8. And if it equals 1, return red or orange or yellow or green or blue or indigo or violet. Okay, so I'll leave that as a little exercise for you to practice return values. But that's the key lesson I wanted to show you with this random library. As well, these random functions might prove useful in future projects, right? A random desc and random int function where we can pass in the low and high could be very useful in other projects. And we would just make sure that we load this random library in our HTML before we run our main JavaScript. Okay, hope that made sense. Take care, and we'll see you in the next video.